settle in and let your breathing slow, as if the air itself is being gently filtered. In a moment, you are standing in a spacecraft cleanroom, Airlock, where the air feels almost politely clean. Everything is bright, bland, and carefully boring, because interesting is how mistakes start. You pull on layers that cover hair, skin, and breath, because humans are walking dust factories, and the spacecraft is not impressed. There is a soft hiss, a steady fan, and a kind of quiet routine that turns into a lullaby, if you let it. Tonight, with your sleepless scientist keeping watch, you will drift through clean rooms, dust, and space itself, calmly noticing how fragile things survive by staying patient and clean enough, one slow step at a time. The airlock door closes behind you with a sound that is more polite than dramatic. You expect silence because you have been trained by movies, but you get airflow instead, a steady push of filtered air that never quite stops. The clean room is not trying to be peaceful. It is trying to be predictable. A spacecraft cleanroom is a place where boredom is a safety feature. Every surface is smooth, pale, and easy to wipe, like a kitchen that has given up on joy. Even the light is designed to reveal problems, not hide them. Shadows are suspicious here. You step forward and you learn your first rule. Move slowly, because fast movement makes invisible weather. Your sleeves brush your sides and you can almost feel the fabric wanting to shed. You are wrapped in layers, not for warmth, but for containment. Hair cover, hood, mask, gloves, boot covers, maybe another pair of gloves, because one pair is never enough. Humans are not visitors in this room. Humans are a contamination event with opinions. You think you are clean when you shower. Congratulations. You are still dropping tiny pieces of yourself like a tree that never stops losing leaves. Skin cells, called corneocytes, flake away from you all day. They are light, dry, and stubbornly portable. In normal life, you donate them to couches, car seats, and the inside of your socks. In here, those same flakes become a risk to hardware that must survive vacuum, vibration, and years of cosmic indifference. You glance at your gloved fingers and you want to touch something. That urge is ancient and unhelpful. The real job of a clean room technician is learning to not do the things your hands suggest. Not scratch, not adjust your mask, not lean, not point too close, not hover your face above an open instrument like you are smelling soup, because breath is not romantic either. Your lungs are warm, wet ecosystems, and every exhale carries moisture and microscopic hitchhikers. So the mask stays on, the hood stays up, and your voice, if you speak, gets softened into fabric. You walk toward the inner door, and your shoes make almost no sound. Clean room floors are often designed to avoid collecting dust and to tolerate constant cleaning. Some have tacky mats near entrances, meant to peel dirt off your boot covers like tape-lifting lint. It is a gentle kind of theft. You take another step, and you notice the air again. It does not swirl like a normal room. It moves with purpose. Clean rooms often use laminar flow, air moving in smooth sheets instead of chaotic curls. The idea is simple and a little insulting. If you keep air flowing in one direction, you can push particles away from sensitive work. It is less like a room and more like a slow, invisible river. The filters that make this possible are the real stars, though they would hate the attention. High-efficiency particulate air filters, often called HEPA, trap tiny particles by forcing air through a dense mat of fibers. Not a sieve, exactly. More like a forest designed to catch travelers. Particles get captured by direct impact, by getting too close and sticking, or by random wandering that ends in contact. You do not need to memorize those mechanisms tonight. You just need to understand the vibe. The clean room is always inhaling, always sorting, always deciding what gets to stay. It is a picky machine with a long memory. You pass through the air shower. If this facility uses one, it is not a spa treatment. Jets of clean air blow across your suit, dislodging particles that are clinging to you like bored passengers. The dislodged bits are pulled away and filtered. You stand still while the room gently scolds you for existing. And then the inner door opens and you step into the bright, bland heart of the place. This is where the spacecraft parts live, mid-assembly, like organs on a stainless steel altar. They are not delicate in the way flowers are delicate. They are delicate in the way a watch is delicate. One stray fiber in the wrong bearing. One grain of dust in the wrong valve seat. One fingerprint on the wrong optical surface. And the system that should behave like physics becomes a system that behaves like a mystery. You may have heard that clean rooms have classes and numbers and standards. Some are rated by how many particles are allowed per volume of air. It sounds like a bureaucrat's lullaby, and it almost is, because this is what the job becomes. Measuring, monitoring, logging, cleaning, repeating. You do not fight dust once. You prevent it forever. You feel the temptation to relax because everything looks so controlled. But clean rooms are not sterile temples. They are negotiated spaces. They are what you get when you accept that you cannot stop contamination, only manage it. Even the air you are breathing is being constantly replaced. It comes in filtered, and it leaves through returns, carrying away whatever the room has collected. Your job is to make sure the wrong things do not settle in the wrong places before the air carries them off. So you learn the slow rituals. You wipe tools, you wipe benches, you wipe handles even though you are wearing gloves, because gloves pick up particles too. You use approved wipes with low lint because the wipe itself can become the problem. You use approved solvent, usually isopropyl alcohol, because it evaporates cleanly. And yes, you let it dry. You do not wave it dry. Waving makes air turbulence, and turbulence makes particle storms. You learn to set things down gently. A hard tap can launch particles like a tiny explosion. You learn to unwrap parts without ripping packaging like a hungry animal. You learn to open bags slowly, because pulling plastic apart can build static charge. Static is the clean room's little prank. It makes light particles cling to surfaces and then suddenly jump when you least want them to. If you have ever watched dust stick to a television screen, you already understand the problem. Now imagine that screen is a sensor or a solar panel or a thermal radiator that has to work flawlessly. Your suit rustles softly as you shift your weight. That sound is not just sound. It is friction, and friction can mean shedding. So you choose smaller movements. You keep your arms close. You walk like you are trying not to wake a sleeping animal. A clean room technician does not need to be strong. They need to be consistent. They need to be the kind of person who can follow a checklist at 2 in the morning without deciding they are smarter than the checklist. Because space does not care about your confidence. Space cares about your margins. You stand near a work surface and you imagine the invisible snowfall around you. In a normal room, particles drift and settle, and no one thinks about it. Here, you think about it constantly, but gently, like keeping track of a candle flame. A dust particle is not one thing. Dust is a neighborhood. Some of it is skin. Some is fabric fibers, especially from cotton, paper, and cheap cloth that loves to unravel. Some is soil, tracked in from outside, ground into smaller pieces by feet, and carried upward by air. Some is soot, from combustion, the remnants of things that burn somewhere else. Some is pollen, tiny biological missiles designed to travel. Some is metalware particles from machinery. Some is just dry droplets from human speech, because talking is also a way of spraying the room with your insides. You begin to understand why the clean room feels so bland. Colorful things shed, soft things shed, even cardboard is suspicious, even wood is suspicious, even certain plastics are suspicious. So the room becomes a world of metals, smooth polymers, and surfaces that can be wiped until they forget they were touched. You, however, do not forget. You feel heat building under the suit. Not much, but enough. Your body is a warm engine in a coldly managed environment. The clean room temperature is controlled for equipment and comfort. But comfort is not the priority. Humidity is controlled too. Too dry and static becomes worse, lifting dust like an elevator. Too humid and you invite other problems like condensation, corrosion, and the quiet ambition of microbes. Many clean rooms live in a middle ground, not too damp, not too dry, a careful compromise. Like everything else in engineering, you look at a component under a clear cover. Maybe it is a star tracker, an optical sensor that helps the spacecraft know where it is pointing. Or maybe it is part of a propulsion system where a valve must open and close with perfect obedience. Either way, the problem with contamination is not just that it is dirty. The problem is that contamination is unpredictable. A particle can block light. A particle can stop a seal from sealing. A particle can become a hot spot when exposed to sun, heating a tiny area and stressing a coating. A particle can outgas later, releasing trapped chemicals into vacuum where they condense on cold surfaces. Outgassing is a beautiful word for a deeply unromantic thing. Materials carry absorbed gases and volatile compounds. In vacuum, those compounds leave. They wander. And then they stick to something colder, like optics. Congratulations, your telescope just grew a foggy film made of somebody's plasticizer. So clean rooms obsess over materials, low outgassing adhesives, low outgassing paints, special tapes that do not shed and do not leave residue, the kind of tape that costs enough to make you stare at it with respectful silence. You are not just cleaning dirt, you are managing chemistry, and you are doing it in slow motion. You might think the hard part is keeping the room clean, but the hard part is keeping yourself clean while doing work. Gloves help, but gloves also lie. They make you feel safe to touch things, but gloves pick up particles, and gloves can transfer oils, and gloves can tear, so you inspect them constantly. You change them often. You learn to remove them without snapping the cuff like a rubber band, because snapping is another particle event. Even walking has technique. Cleanroom training includes how to turn, how to bend, how to reach. If you reach across an open component, gravity will take whatever you dislodge and deliver it straight down. The universe loves a simple delivery method. So you move around, not over. You position yourself so your body is not a ceiling above sensitive surfaces. You become aware of your own orientation, like a careful dancer. Some cleanrooms have sticky rollers to remove particles from garments. Some have specific gowning sequences, because the order matters. If you touch your hood, then your gloves, you carry hood particles onto your hands. If you touch your shoes, then your sleeves, you spread floor contamination upward. And you will do it all without noticing, unless you treat yourself like a system that needs procedure. You begin to suspect that you would not last a day here. Not because you are incapable, but because your normal life has trained you to improvise, to scratch your nose without thinking, to brush hair from your face, to rub your eyes, to lean your hip on a counter, to put your phone down on any surface like you own the place. A clean room does not care what you are used to. It cares what you actually do. And it keeps score with microscopes. Some facilities do particle counts, using instruments that suck in air and count particles by how they scatter light. It is like a census for invisible citizens. When counts rise, you investigate. Is a filter failing? Is a door being opened too often? Is someone moving too fast? Did someone bring in the wrong material? Is there construction nearby? Even the act of cleaning can raise counts at first, because wiping dislodges particles before they get captured. The room is always in motion, not loud motion, just relentless, small motion. And you start to realize the mood of the place. It is not sterile fear. It is steady caution. You are maintaining an environment where a spacecraft can be assembled without acquiring little stowaways that will cause trouble later. Because later is expensive. Later is launch day. Later is when the spacecraft is sealed and no one can open it again without consequences. Later is vacuum and radiation and thermal cycling, the slow torture of materials. So you fix what you can now with wipes and filters and discipline. You log what you did because memory is unreliable. You label everything because confusion is contagious. You sign off steps because accountability is part of cleanliness too. A clean room is also a clean process. You look at a small tool on the bench. It is stainless steel, wiped, bagged, and approved. Even tools have social status here. Some can go near flight hardware, some cannot. Some are banned because they shed plating or have lubricants that outgas. Even pens can be special because normal pens flake ink and shed plastic. It is an entire civilization built around not making crumbs. And yet, crumbs still happen because the enemy is not evil. It is physics. Brownian motion, the jittery dance of small particles in air, keeps some of them aloft longer than you would expect. Air currents, created by your body heat, create slow convection plumes that lift particles upward. Your warm torso is a gentle chimney. Even in laminar flow, you create disturbance. The room forgives you only if you stay slow. You might notice the smell, or rather the lack of it. Clean rooms often smell like almost nothing because air is exchanged and filtered. Sometimes you catch a faint hint of alcohol from cleaning solvent. Sometimes a faint plastic note from garments. But mostly, the room is neutral. The sensory world is reduced, and that reduction becomes its own kind of calm. Your mind has fewer things to chew, so it starts chewing on the remaining thing. The idea that you are shedding right now, even with the suit, even with the hood, even with the mask, you are still a source. Skin flakes come off inside your garments. Hair escapes sometimes. Tiny fibers from the suit itself shed under friction. So the clean room does not just rely on your clothing. It relies on ventilation patterns that carry contaminants away from critical areas. Workstations may have localized laminar flow hoods. The air above a sensitive component might be especially clean, flowing downward like a clear waterfall. You keep your hands within that flow. You keep your movements within that flow. You begin to respect the fact that air can be engineered like architecture. Invisible walls, invisible drains. You can almost picture particles as tiny, weightless beads. Some will settle if the air is calm. Some will be captured by filters. Some will cling to surfaces by static or moisture. Some will ride your sleeve like a commuter. You cannot see them, but you act as if you can. That is professionalism here, acting on behalf of the unseen. You take a slow look around. The room is full of soft routine. People move with small steps. Someone wipes a surface in straight lines, not circles, because circles can redeposit contamination. Someone checks a gauge. Someone points, but keeps distance. Someone reads from a procedure, voice muffled, and the muffled voice feels appropriate. No sharp noises, no sudden laughter. Not because joy is illegal, but because sudden movement is. In a clean room, even excitement has to be filtered. You start to understand the title of your job: technician. You are not here to have ideas. You are here to make sure ideas survive contact with reality. You are here to keep the spacecraft boring until it is ready to be heroic. And the heroism, if it happens, will not be loud. It will be a quiet burn of thrusters, a steady power output from solar arrays, a clean signal back to Earth, a camera that opens its eye and sees something far away. All of that depends on you not dropping a single unwanted speck in the wrong place. So you keep going. A checklist waits for you, and it is not interested in your personality. Each line is a small promise that you will do the same thing every time. If you skip a step, nothing explodes in the room. The consequences prefer to travel forward in time and charge interest later. You lean closer to a work surface, careful to keep your torso back. You notice a clear plastic cover and the way it holds still air underneath. Still air is where particles like to land, like tired birds. So the cover stays on until the exact moment it must come off. When it does, your hands move in slow, flat arcs. Not because you are graceful, but because grace is just controlled airflow. You hold a tool above the bench for 1 second longer. That pause is not indecision, it is particle discipline. If you set something down too fast, you make a tiny gust. The gust does not care that the hardware costs more than your house. Congratulations, you have invented weather in the most expensive room you will ever stand in. Somewhere nearby, an instrument quietly counts airborne particles. It does not judge you morally. It just reports numbers. like a cashier scanning your mistakes. A technician might call out a reading, and everyone adjusts without drama. Not panic, not blame, just a small shift in behavior, slower movement, fewer people near the open assembly, a reminder to keep hands inside the clean air curtain. Even your posture matters because heat rises off your body. Warm air climbs, and it drags hitchhikers with it. Your chest is a gentle chimney, and dust loves free rides. That is why you do not hover over optics. Optics are where cleanroom discipline becomes almost emotional. A mirror or lens looks innocent, like a calm eye, but its surface is a landscape at the scale of light. One fingerprint is not just a smudge. It is oils, salts, and little islands that scatter photons. And photons are picky. They want smooth roads. A single dust mote can turn a perfect image into a faint fog. Not always, not dramatically, but enough to ruin a measurement. And the mission does not fly for vibes. It flies for data that can survive a review board. You watch someone clean a surface the way you might pet a nervous animal. Straight strokes, overlapping slightly, and always with fresh wipes. No scrubbing, no circles, no improvisation. The solvent flashes off, leaving a moment of cold, clean nothing. The wipe goes into a sealed waste container because trash is also contamination. Even the trash has rules here. The room is clean, but it is not empty of risk. Some contamination is not a crumb, it is a molecule. Outgassing sounds like a small joke, like a bicycle tire. In reality, it is chemistry trying to escape its packaging. Plastics, adhesives, foams, and coatings can release volatile compounds over time. Volatile just means eager to leave, like a coworker at 5 p.m. In vacuum, those molecules drift away easily. Then they find something cold, and they decide to settle there forever. Cold surfaces in space are like the last open seat on a train. So cleanrooms care about what materials are allowed near flight hardware. There are approved lists and banned lists, and long arguments about tape. Some tapes shed adhesive or release siloxanes, slippery molecules that love optics. Siloxane contamination is a special kind of tragedy. It is invisible while it happens, and obvious when it is too late. You do not get to wipe a telescope mirror in orbit like a bathroom mirror. You do not get to open the spacecraft and apologize. You get what you built, plus whatever the universe adds. That is the real reason the room feels like a ritual. You are trying to remove surprises before space invents new ones. You shift to another station, and you feel the suit tug at your shoulders. Even the garment is a compromise. Clean enough, but still a fabric. Cleanroom garments are often made from polyester blends, not because polyester is charming, but because it sheds less than cotton. Cotton is basically a fiber sprinkler, and it has no shame. The garment also holds in your hair, which is enthusiastic about escaping. Hair is strong, light, and annoyingly good at traveling. It can wedge into seals, float into sensors, and cling by static. This room treats hair like a rogue agent. You move past a cart of bagged hardware, each bag sealed and labeled. Double bagging is common because the outer bag is dirty by association. You remove the outer bag in one zone, then move inward. It is a little like peeling fruit, except the fruit is a thruster valve. Somewhere, someone keeps a log of every bag you open. Paper is often restricted because paper sheds fibers, so you might use special cleanroom paper or a tablet in a sealed cover. Even writing becomes a controlled operation. A normal pen can flake. A mechanical pencil can drop graphite dust. So there are approved pens, like approved tools, like approved everything. The room is an ecosystem built from prohibitions. And as you stand in it, you start noticing the quiet snowfall you never see. Because dust is not one enemy, it is a crowd. Skin flakes, fabric threads, and tiny grit from outside. Pollen grains, which are basically biological delivery drones. Soot, which is carbon that used to be part of someone else's fire. Metal particles, shaved off by wear in machines, even dried droplets from speech, which is why conversation stays minimal. Humans shed quietly, constantly, like a candle giving up heat. Not dramatic, not painful, just ongoing. Your outer skin is dead cells stacked into a barrier. The barrier works because it is disposable. Those cells detach and drift away, carrying salts and oils with them. In normal life, you never thank them. In here, you fear them with professional courtesy. You imagine one flake landing inside a connector. It might block a contact, or absorb moisture, or just sit there until vibration moves it. Launch vibration is not gentle. Launch is the planet trying to shake you off like lint. Anything loose can become a projectile at the microscopic scale. And then there is static, the clean room's quiet prank. When surfaces rub, electrons shift around, and some materials charge up. A charged surface attracts particles the way a drama attracts attention. You peel open a plastic bag too fast, and it crackles faintly. That crackle is not just sound, it is charge separation. Now, the bag wants to hold onto dust, and dust wants to hold back. The solution is patience, and sometimes grounding straps. Some technicians wear heel straps or wrist straps in certain areas. The goal is to keep charge from building so particles do not leap unexpectedly. Because dust does not always fall like snow. Sometimes it jumps like it heard your plans and disagreed. You walk to a window and you look out at the rest of the facility. It is normal air out there, normal chaos, normal human shedding. The clean room is a bubble of enforced boredom. It costs money to keep it boring. Fans run constantly, pushing enormous volumes of air through filters. Energy goes into maintaining pressure differences between rooms. Often, the clean room is kept at slightly higher pressure than adjacent spaces. That way, when a door opens, clean air leaks outward. It is a gentle exhale designed to keep dirty air from coming in. Air becomes a security system. You begin to understand the deeper joke. Humans want to explore space, but we cannot even stop shedding in a hallway. So we build rooms that babysit our skin. We build procedures that teach our hands how to behave. And then we call it progress. A coworker passes you, moving like a slow fish in bright water. Their goggles catch the overhead light. For a moment, you can see your own reflection, masked and anonymous. Clean rooms erase identity on purpose. Everyone is covered, everyone is quiet, everyone follows the same steps. It is hard to be special in a hood and booties. This is comforting in a bleak way, because if the mission fails, It will not be because you were not charismatic. It will be because a particle went somewhere it should not, or because someone skipped a line on a checklist, or because a material was chosen for convenience instead of behavior in vacuum. The universe does not accept excuses with good tone. It accepts only what actually works. You return to the bench, and you focus on the small scale again. A single dust particle can be a few microns across. Micron is a word that means tiny. Without forcing you to picture it, it is the scale where hairs look like tree trunks. It is the scale where a scratch becomes a canyon. And it is the scale where light starts to behave strangely. Light interacts with particles in ways that depend on size and wavelength. That is why haze looks white and why smoke glows in headlights. The particles scatter light, sending it in directions you did not ask for. On a sensor, that scatter becomes noise. On a solar panel, it becomes lost power. On a thermal radiator, it can change how heat is emitted. Contamination is not just dirt. It is altered physics. And the most annoying part is that it is often uneven. A thin film here, a spot there, a patch you cannot see until it matters. Cleanliness is partly about removing stuff, but also about uniformity. A clean, consistent surface behaves predictably. A patchy surface behaves like a mood swing. Spacecraft do not need moods. They need boring, repeatable behavior in an environment that hates them. And once you realize how sensitive spacecraft are, you start thinking about why. Not because engineers are delicate people, because space is not gentle and it charges rent for every weakness. Outside this room, beyond the building, beyond the air, there is vacuum. Vacuum is not nothing. Vacuum is what happens when you remove the medium that normally forgives you. No air to carry heat away easily. No air to cushion impacts. No air to slow down small fragments. No air to spread smells, which is the one mercy you do not get. Space is quiet, but only because there is no air to carry sound. Inside a spacecraft, it is never truly quiet. Fans hum, pumps cycle, valves click, and air moves on purpose. The silence you imagine is a movie invention. Like clean explosions, real spacecraft sound like a small, tired factory. A factory where the machines do not get days off. Because you cannot open a window in orbit. You cannot let the air out and bring in a fresh breeze. Your breathable atmosphere is a managed resource, like water on a long hike. Life support is mostly airflow, pushed and pulled through filters. Carbon dioxide is removed, oxygen is replenished. Humidity is controlled. If airflow stops, pockets of stale air form and CO2 can accumulate. On Earth, convection mixes air for free. Warm air rises, cool air sinks, and your room breathes with you. In microgravity, air just sits there, lazy and indifferent. So the spacecraft must mix it, constantly. That hum you hear is the price of not suffocating quietly. Heat is also strange in space. On Earth, you lose heat by convection and conduction through air. In vacuum, convection is gone. Your heat leaves mostly by radiation, infrared light leaking from your skin, and by conduction through whatever touches you. That is why spacecraft have radiators, panels designed to dump heat as light. It feels poetic until you remember it is just waste management. Electronics generate heat. Batteries generate heat. If you cannot get rid of it, components drift out of their safe temperatures, and temperature affects everything. Materials expand and contract, lubricants thicken or thin, batteries lose performance, sensors drift. Space is an extreme thermostat, flipping between sun and shade. Sunlight in space is sharp, unfiltered by atmosphere. It can bake surfaces quickly, especially dark ones. Shade is not cozy either. In shadow, you only have what heat you can keep, and the background is effectively a deep, cold sink. Space is not cold like a winter night. Space is cold like neglect. So spacecraft are wrapped in insulation, shiny blankets called multi-layer insulation. They look like crinkled gold foil, like a baked potato with a graduate degree. Those layers reduce radiative heat transfer. They are delicate too, and they hate contamination. A dirty blanket absorbs more sunlight and radiates differently. Your nice thermal design becomes a surprise heater. Surprises again. Always surprises. Then there is the pressure problem. On Earth, you have an entire atmosphere sitting on you. You do not notice because your body is built for it. In space, outside the spacecraft, pressure is nearly zero. If your suit breaches, air rushes out, not because space is sucking, but because your air wants to expand. Water at body temperature can boil at low pressure. Congratulations, the moisture on your tongue becomes ambitious. But a spacecraft leak is not always dramatic. Often, it is a slow leak, like a polite thief. A small hole can vent air quietly for hours. You might notice a pressure gauge drifting. You might hear a faint hiss if you are close. Or you might notice nothing until alarms complain. And by then, you are doing math with your remaining air. Space is not cinematic. It is procedural, like a checklist, but with higher stakes and worse lighting. Even outside hazards are often small, not giant asteroids, not alien monsters, just tiny things moving very fast. Micrometeoroids and orbital debris are the universe's way of sanding your spacecraft. A grain of paint can hit with the energy of a bullet. Speed does that, and space is full of speed. In orbit, everything is rushing around Earth, not because it is eager, but because falling never ends. A spacecraft in low Earth orbit is moving at several kilometers per second. Say that slowly and feel how unreasonable it is. A speck of aluminum at that speed is not a speck anymore. It is a projectile with no sympathy. Engineers know this, and they design shielding. Often, it is layered, called a Whipple shield. A thin bumper layer sits outside, separated from the main wall. When a small particle hits the bumper, it breaks apart and vaporizes. The debris spreads out like a tiny shotgun blast. By the time it reaches the main wall, the energy is distributed. The wall can survive impacts that would have punched straight through a single layer. It is a practical trick, like putting a screen door in front of a window, not to stop the storm, but to break it up. And orbital space is not empty, not anymore. There are old rocket bodies, dead satellites, bolts, flakes of paint. Even frozen droplets from past venting events can become debris. Humanity has been leaving crumbs in orbit for decades. Of course we have. We cannot stop shedding, even at planetary scale. And when those crumbs collide, they create more crumbs. That is the nightmare scenario called a cascade. Not dramatic, just exponential, like paperwork. This is why tracking is important. Radar and telescopes watch larger objects. Space agencies publish catalogs of debris. If something big might pass close, spacecraft can maneuver slightly. A small nudge, a tiny burn, to avoid a future headache. Most impacts, though, are too small to track. So you accept a certain level of risk and you armor for it. The spacecraft is not a knight. It is a careful compromise between mass, strength, cost, and probability. And probability is not comforting when you are the one in the path. Speaking of paths, orbit itself is not floating. You think you are weightless because gravity is gone. Wrong. Gravity is still pulling on you almost as strongly as it does on the ground. You are weightless because you are falling and missing the Earth. You are in continuous freefall, sideways, fast enough to keep going around. Orbit is a very elegant failure to hit the ground. And if you are on the spacecraft, you are falling too. Your stomach, your bones, your tools, your droplets of water, everything shares the same fall, so nothing presses on anything else. That is why crumbs float. That is why dust becomes a bigger nuisance inside. On Earth, particles settle. In microgravity, they linger. They drift into fans, into filters, into your eyes if you are unlucky. Cleanliness becomes not just a rule, but comfort. Even a tiny crumb can become an annoying satellite inside your cabin. It will not fall behind a panel. It will hover, waiting for airflow to carry it somewhere inconvenient. So spacecraft have filters too, and screens, and careful airflow design. The cleanroom habits follow the hardware into orbit, and the irony is that orbit is not stable forever. Even up there is a whisper of atmosphere. The upper atmosphere is thin, but it exists. It drags on spacecraft, gently. Drag is like a tired hand on your shoulder. It slows you down, and the slower orbit means you fall lower. Lower means more air, more drag, more falling. Eventually, if you do nothing, you re-enter. Re-entry is not a punishment. It is physics finishing the conversation. To stay up, spacecraft sometimes need reboost maneuvers. Small thruster firings to add speed, to raise altitude, even tiny pushes matter when applied at the right time. Orbital mechanics is stingy but fair. If you push the right direction at the right point, you buy time. If you push wrong, you waste propellant and dignity. Propellant is precious because it is heavy. Every kilogram launched costs money and complexity. So spacecraft are built like minimalists. No extra mass, no extra parts, no extra anything unless it earns its keep. Which brings you back, strangely, to the clean room. Because the clean room is where you avoid adding extra problems. In orbit, you cannot send a technician with a wipe and a bottle of alcohol. In orbit, you live with your choices. So every small discipline down here is a way of buying calm up there. You imagine the spacecraft now, sealed and ready, panels closed, fasteners torqued, connectors latched. It looks solid, but it is still vulnerable to specks and films. Because the universe loves small weaknesses, a single flake can become the seed of a failure. Not because the flake is powerful, but because systems are precise. Precision is fragile, and space punishes fragility. If you stay with that thought, you begin to see the spacecraft as a layered animal. Layered because there is no such thing as a single wall between you and everything. Because the outside is a constant, patient assault of light, cold, heat, and fast dust. Because if you build one perfect shell, the universe will find the seam. So you give the spacecraft skins and blankets and bumpers and coatings, and every layer has a job, and every job has a way to fail quietly. You start with the outside because the outside is where the lies are. It looks smooth, like a clean white panel under a clean blue sky. But the sky is not coming with you. Up there, the weather is made of photons and microscopic shrapnel. So, you wrap the spacecraft in something that looks like crinkled foil, multi-layer insulation, a stack of thin films separated by tiny spacers. It works by being annoying to heat. Heat tries to cross, and the layers keep reflecting it back and forth. Not because heat is confused, but because you made the path exhausting. And on the outside of that shiny blanket, there are coatings. Some surfaces are painted white, not for style, but for temperature. White reflects sunlight and radiates heat in a predictable way. Black can be useful too when you want to dump heat. Thermal control is not decoration, it is budgeting. Every watt of heat has to be guided like a toddler in a museum. Inside the spacecraft, the heat sources are steady and rude. Electronics do not care about your comfort. Batteries warm themselves while they work. Motors and actuators turn energy into motion and then into heat anyway. So you build heat paths, metal routes that conduct warmth to radiators. Heat pipes are one of the stranger tricks. A sealed tube, a little working fluid inside, and a wick lining the wall. Warmth at one end makes the fluid evaporate. The vapor flows, condenses at the cooler end, and returns through the wick. No moving parts, just phase changes doing a commute. It is like building a tiny weather system on purpose. And it works, until contamination or damage changes the rules. That is the theme you keep meeting. The spacecraft is an argument against chaos, made of compromises. Speaking of chaos, there is something worse than heat. There is speed. You already know the headline, tiny grains can hit like bullets. But the part that sinks in, slowly, is how ordinary the grains are. Micrometeoroids are often sand-sized, or smaller. Some are leftovers from comets, dusty trails that Earth crosses. Some are fragments from collisions in the asteroid belt. Some are debris from us, because of course it is. Paint flecks, metal chips, bits of insulation, a screw that got liberated. You do not need a boulder to ruin a day. You need something the size of a pepper flake, moving faster than guilt. When it hits, it does not thud. It flashes. At those speeds, impact energy turns into heat instantly. The particle and a little bit of the target can vaporize. It becomes a tiny cloud of plasma and fragments. So your outer skin is not just a wall, it is a sacrificial surface. And that is why layered shielding exists. A Whipple shield is a calm little cruelty. You put a thin bumper panel out front, you leave a gap behind it. Then you put the real pressure wall further back. The bumper takes the hit, shatters the particle, spreads the damage. The gap gives the debris room to expand, to lose focus. By the time it reaches the back wall, it is a spray, not a drill. It is the same logic as wearing layers in winter. Not one thick coat, but several thin ones with trapped air. Spacecraft do that too, but for violence. And even with shielding, you accept that impacts happen. You design so a small puncture does not become a catastrophe. You divide the spacecraft into compartments when you can. You route cables with slack and protection. You add redundancy, not because you like extra weight, but because you like surviving. Redundancy is how engineers admit the universe has a point. A duplicate sensor, a second computer, an alternate heater, a backup path for power. The spacecraft becomes a creature with extra organs, not to be fancy, but because failure is common. And then there is radiation, the quiet one. No sound, no smell, no impact mark on the outside. Just charged particles and high-energy photons passing through. In low Earth orbit, you are still under Earth's magnetic umbrella, partly. It helps, but it is not a force field from a cartoon. It is a complex leaky system that traps some particles and guides others. You pass through regions like the South Atlantic anomaly. It is a place where the inner radiation belt dips closer. Satellites know it like a rough neighborhood. In that zone, instruments can get noisy. Computers can get bit-flipped. A single energetic particle can smack into a memory cell. It can change a 0 to a 1, like an unwanted edit. Congratulations, your spacecraft has intrusive thoughts. So you add error correction, you add watchdog timers, you add routines that restart systems when they behave strangely. Sometimes, the correct response to cosmic rays is to turn it off and on again. It is humbling in a very modern way. You also add shielding, often aluminum, sometimes special materials. But shielding is tricky. More mass can stop some particles, but create secondary radiation. A high-energy particle hits the shield, produces a shower of others. So you do the math, and the testing, and the compromises. And through all of it, you keep thinking about cleanliness. Because contamination is not only a mechanical nuisance. Contamination can change how surfaces behave under radiation. A thin film can darken, called radiation-induced discoloration. Optics can lose transmission. Thermal blankets can change absorptivity. A spacecraft can slowly cook itself differently because of a film you cannot see. This is why cleanrooms feel like overkill. They are not cleaning for today. They are cleaning for years of exposure to a place that never forgives. Now, there is another layer you do not see from the outside. The orbit itself. It is not a location, it is a behavior. You are always falling, always missing, always trying not to touch the air too much. And the air is there, even when everyone swears it is not. At a few hundred kilometers up, the atmosphere is thin, not thin like a mountain peak, thin like a rumor. But it still drags. Drag steals energy. Energy in orbit is altitude and speed and time. So even in space, you are in a slow negotiation with air. The spacecraft feels it as a gentle braking, not a shove, more like a hand on your sleeve. Over weeks and months, that hand matters. Solar activity makes it worse. When the sun is active, it sends out ultraviolet and particles. They heat Earth's upper atmosphere. The atmosphere puffs up, expands upward, gets denser at orbital altitudes. Satellites suddenly feel more drag. Some missions watch solar forecasts like sailors watching weather. A storm on the sun can change your orbit. The irony is soothing in a dark way. Even in orbit, you are not away from Earth. Earth reaches up with a thin breath and slowly pulls you back. And while you loop around, You pass from sunlight to shadow, every orbit, day and night, day and night. Thermal cycling. Materials expand and contract slightly over and over. Fasteners relax, interfaces creep, tiny cracks can grow a little each cycle. It is fatigue, the same phenomenon that breaks paper clips, except it happens in expensive alloys with strict quality control. So engineers choose materials carefully. They match coefficients of thermal expansion when they can. That phrase means how much something changes size with temperature. If two bonded materials expand differently, they stress each other. Over time, stress becomes delamination, cracking, loosening. Again, failure is a slow story with a quiet voice. And because orbit is constant motion, you also deal with atomic oxygen. This one feels unfair because it sounds gentle. Atomic oxygen is oxygen split into single atoms by sunlight. Up in low Earth orbit, it is chemically aggressive. A lone oxygen atom wants to react. It hits polymers, coatings, and composites and chews them up. It erodes surfaces slowly, like sandpaper made of chemistry. Multi-layer insulation can get eaten. Thermal control paints can degrade, so you add protective coatings. You test samples in simulated environments. You plan for the slow nibbling, and you accept that the spacecraft will age. Even machines have skin problems. Now, you can feel how everything connects. Cleanroom discipline protects optics from films. Films change thermal control. Thermal changes stress materials. Stress creates cracks. Cracks become failures. And all of it happens while you are falling around Earth at ridiculous speed. You start to see why spacecraft assembly feels like tending a fragile animal. Not because the animal is cute, because it is expensive, delicate, and surrounded by predators. And predators, in this case, are physics. Speaking of falling, you realize orbit is not a place of peace. It is a constant balancing act between gravity and speed. Gravity is pulling you down relentlessly. Your sideways speed keeps you from hitting. If you slow down, your orbit drops. If you speed up in the right direction, your orbit rises. But even that is not intuitive. If you burn forward in orbit, you speed up where you are. That raises your orbit on the opposite side. You get a higher apogee, a higher far point. Then you can burn again at that far point to circularize. It is like pushing a swing, but the swing is Earth. Orbital mechanics rewards patience and timing. It punishes improvisation with great efficiency. So spacecraft do station keeping. They do small burns to maintain altitude and orientation. Some use chemical thrusters, little jets of gas. Some use electric propulsion, ion engines that push gently but for a long time. Ion propulsion is not dramatic. It is like being pushed by a persistent breath. A xenon atom is ionized, accelerated by electric fields, and shot out. Momentum goes one way. Spacecraft nudges the other. Low thrust, high efficiency. Perfect for long missions, if you can tolerate boredom. And boredom, as you have learned, is a feature. But every burn uses propellant, and propellant is mass. Mass is cost. Cost is politics. Politics is another kind of contamination. So you use as little as possible. You plan trajectories like chess moves, and you accept that eventually the tank runs out. Then drag and gravity finish the job. That is how most low-orbit spacecraft die. Not with an explosion, but with a slow dip into thicker air. Then heating, then plasma, then fragments, then silence. A clean ending in a very hot way. But you are not dead yet. You are still inside the machine, inside the humming cabin, and this is where the story pivots back inward. Because the outside hazards are flashy, but the daily reality is air. Air management is the quiet job that never ends. In microgravity, your exhale does not rise away from your face. It hangs, a warm cloud, unless airflow steals it. Carbon dioxide is heavier than oxygen, but in microgravity, heavier does not create the same layering. There is no buoyancy-driven convection in the usual sense, so pockets form based on airflow patterns. That is why fans are always running. The fans are not for comfort. They are for mixing, for preventing invisible suffocation zones. In early missions, astronauts noticed this. They could feel a stale bubble around their head if airflow was poor. Imagine breathing the same exhale repeatedly, like being haunted by yourself. So spacecraft ventilation is designed with care. Supply vents and return vents create circulation loops. Ducts route air through filters, through heat exchangers, through scrubbers. And those scrubbers are doing chemistry quietly. Carbon dioxide removal can be done with absorbent beds. Lithium hydroxide canister systems were common in earlier designs. Lithium hydroxide reacts with carbon dioxide to form lithium carbonate and water. It works well, and it is simple. It is also consumable. Every reaction uses up the absorbent. So you bring canisters and you throw them away into the category of used resources. Later systems aim for regeneration. Zeolites, porous minerals, can absorb carbon dioxide. Then you heat or depressurize them to release it. You can vent it or process it further. On the International Space Station, systems like the carbon dioxide removal assembly do this kind of cycling. Beds that take turns, one absorbing, one regenerating. It is like lungs made of rock. Then oxygen has to be replenished. You can bring tanks, but tanks run out. You can use electrolysis, splitting water into oxygen and hydrogen. Oxygen goes to the cabin. Hydrogen is often vented unless you have a way to use it. Some systems combine hydrogen with carbon dioxide in a Sabatier reaction. That produces methane and water. The water can be recycled. Split again, the methane is usually vented. Congratulations, your spacecraft farts methane into space. Not for humor, but for mass balance. Water is its own obsession. Humidity in the cabin comes from breathing, sweating, cooking, wet towels. If humidity is too high, condensation forms. Condensation hides in corners, in ducts, behind panels. Water plus warmth plus nutrients equals microbial growth. And microbes do not respect your mission patch. They make biofilms, slimy communities. They can clog filters, corrode metals, smell weird. The smell is not romantic either. It is a closed ecosystem smell, like a gym bag with a degree. So humidity control is constant. Dehumidifiers condense water out of air. The condensate is collected, filtered, treated, and reused. Because in space, every cup matters. Waste management is similarly unglamorous. Urine becomes a resource. On the station, urine is processed to recover water. Distillation, under low pressure, filtration, catalytic oxidation. It turns bodily waste into drinking water. Not because anyone enjoys the idea, because mass is expensive. And physics does not care about your feelings. And while all this is happening, particulate filtration continues. Because humans still shed skin flakes, hair, fibers from clothing, crumbs from food. In microgravity, those particles float. They find fans and stick to screens. They get trapped in filters, slowly building a mat. Filters have to be replaced, and replacing them is a ritual. Open panel, remove filter carefully, bag it, install new one, log it. Maintenance is how you keep a spacecraft from becoming a haunted house. And you do it while everything is moving slowly around you. A screwdriver can drift away if you let go. A tiny screw can become a long-term problem. Foreign object debris, called FOD, is a nightmare everywhere. In spacecraft, it is worse because it does not fall. So tools are tethered, parts are accounted for. If you lose something, you find it. You do not shrug. You do not say, "It will turn up." Because turn up might mean inside a fan at 3 a.m. when alarms start. So you track, you inventory. You become the kind of person who respects small objects. And when you think about it, that is exactly what the cleanroom trained you for. The cleanroom is not just cleanliness. It is behavior under constraint. It is patience, accountability, and slow hands. The same personality traits that keep dust off optics also keep screws out of vents. Inside the spacecraft, cleanliness becomes comfort. A floating crumb is not just contamination. It is an annoyance that will find your eye. A stray fiber can tickle your nose inside a sealed cabin. You cannot just open a window and let it out. So you wipe, you vacuum with special vacuums that do not exhaust dust back out. You use wipes that do not shed. You clean vents, screens, and handholds. Handholds are touched constantly, and oils accumulate. Oils are not dangerous, but they trap particles. Over time, surfaces get grimy. The station has housekeeping days. Even in orbit, you mop. It is deeply human to carry chores into space. And deep down, you know why. Because a closed system grows weird when ignored. Air gets stale. Surfaces collect films. Microbes bloom in hidden damp places. So routine maintenance is not optional. It is the difference between a livable machine and a slow biological experiment. There is a philosophical joke hiding here. You left Earth to escape the mess, and then you brought the mess with you in your skin and breath. So you built filters and procedures and checklists, and you spend part of your precious orbital time doing chores. Not because you failed, because you are alive. Alive means leaking. Alive means shedding. Alive means maintenance. Now, there is something else that changes in space. Not just the environment. You. Microgravity alters the human body in ways that feel like a bureaucratic punishment. Your fluids shift upward because gravity is no longer pulling them down. Your face gets puffy, your legs get a little thinner. Astronauts call it bird legs sometimes. Your body thinks, briefly, that you have too much fluid. It responds by making you pee more. So you lose plasma volume. Your cardiovascular system adapts. Then, when you return to Earth, gravity returns. and you can feel faint. Your body has to relearn what down means. Your muscles weaken if you do not use them against resistance. On Earth, standing is exercise. In orbit, you have to simulate work. So, you use treadmills with harnesses. You use resistance machines. You strap yourself down and pull against elastic and vacuum cylinders. Exercise becomes a job, like cleaning. Bone loss is another slow theft. Bones remodel constantly, adding and removing mineral. Under load, bone tends to strengthen. Without load, bone resorption can outpace formation. Calcium leaves bone, enters blood, and can contribute to kidney stones. Congratulations, your skeleton is negotiating with physics and losing. So astronauts take countermeasures. Exercise, nutrition, monitoring. Again, maintenance. And this brings you gently to the next inner system. If the spacecraft is a closed environment with filters and routines, so are you. You are not a single thing. You are layers of barrier, fluid, and immune paperwork. And like the spacecraft, you survive by constant, boring work. Your immune system is not a heroic knight. It is a janitorial staff with weapons. Most of the time, it is not fighting a dramatic war. It is doing surveillance, cleanup, and quiet diplomacy. You have physical barriers first: skin, mucous membranes, the lining of your gut. They keep most outsiders out. Your skin is a wall of dead cells on top, living layers beneath. It is oily, slightly acidic, and full of microbes that belong there. Yes, you have residence. Your microbiome is not decoration. It occupies space and resources, making it harder for invaders to take over. It is like having tenants who keep the squatters out. Then you have innate immunity, fast response, general tools. Cells like neutrophils patrol in your blood, ready to swarm trouble. Macrophages sit in tissues, big eaters, engulfing debris and microbes. They also talk to other immune cells by releasing cytokines, chemical messages. Cytokines are like group chats, and sometimes they get out of hand. Inflammation is the loud part you notice. Redness, swelling, heat, pain, it is increased blood flow and immune activity in an area. It helps bring cells and molecules to the site. It also makes everything feel worse. Inflammation is useful, but it is not polite. It is an alarm that wakes the whole neighborhood. And sometimes the alarm does not shut off properly. Chronic inflammation is like a smoke detector with anxiety. When it keeps chirping, you stop paying attention, and that is when the fire wins quietly. Your immune system has a similar problem with false alarms. If every harmless speck triggers a full emergency, you spend all your energy on noise. So the system learns, and it edits itself, and it tries to stay calm. Sometimes it fails, and you get allergies or autoimmunity or chronic irritation. Congratulations. The security team is now tackling the residents. You are walking through your own tissues like a guarded facility. Every corridor is warm, wet, and softly pressurized. Every surface is coated in a thin film of fluid, because dryness is injury. Your blood is not just a liquid, it is a shipping lane. Cells travel it like delivery vans with very specialized cargo. White blood cells drift, roll, and stick to vessel walls when signaled. They squeeze between endothelial cells. leaving the bloodstream on purpose. This is called diapedesis, which means politely getting out through the cracks. It is how immune cells reach a splinter in your finger. It is also how inflammation makes tissue swell as plasma leaks outward. Swelling is annoying, but it is also a delivery strategy. More fluid means more proteins, more clotting factors, more immune tools. You feel it as tightness and heat. Your body feels it as logistics. If you cut yourself, the first response is not bravery. It is plugging the leak. Platelets rush to exposed collagen, sticky little discs turning into spiky grappling hooks. They release signals that recruit more platelets, making a clump. Clotting proteins activate in a cascade like dominoes made of enzymes. Fibrin strands form, a net that stabilizes the plug. It is fast, messy, and effective, which is basically biology's brand. Then the cleanup begins. Neutrophils arrive early, aggressive, short-lived, and not subtle. They kill bacteria with reactive chemicals and sometimes damage your own tissue too. They are the coworker who solves problems with a flamethrower. Macrophages arrive and start eating debris, dead cells, and leftovers. Macrophage means big eater, which is refreshingly honest. They are slower and more methodical. They also act as messengers, showing pieces of invaders to other cells. This is where the adaptive immune system joins the story. T cells and B cells are the specialists trained on specific targets. They do not respond instantly because training takes time. You do not want them reacting to everything, so they wait for evidence and signals and proper introductions. A B cell that recognizes a target can become a plasma cell. A plasma cell is basically an antibody factory with no other hobbies. Antibodies are proteins shaped to bind specific molecular features. They tag invaders for destruction, like putting bright stickers on trouble. Some antibodies neutralize toxins, blocking them from binding your cells. Others clump pathogens together, making them easier to capture. T cells come in flavors too. Helper T cells coordinate responses, releasing cytokines that guide the chaos. Cytotoxic T cells kill infected cells because sometimes you burn the room to save the house. And then there are regulatory T cells, the quiet ones. They help prevent overreaction, telling everyone to stop yelling. When regulation fails, inflammation can linger like bad music in a store. You can feel it in swollen joints, irritated skin, aching tissues. The system is still working, but it is working in the wrong rhythm. And because your body is a closed system, the noise spreads. Inflammatory signals affect sleep, appetite, mood, and energy. You are not imagining it when illness makes you tired. That fatigue is part of the strategy. If you rest, you spend fewer calories on movement and more on repair. Sickness behavior is not weakness, it is resource management. Your body is telling you to stop wandering into more germs. It is the same logic as a spacecraft going into safe mode. When something looks wrong, you power down non-essential systems. You wait. You stabilize. You run diagnostics. Your fever is another diagnostic tool, in a blunt way. Raising body temperature can hinder some pathogens. It can also speed immune reactions. It is expensive though. Every degree costs energy, and your metabolism pays the bill. So fever is used carefully, and sometimes it overshoots. Children run hot because their control systems are still learning. Adults run fevers too, but we complain more creatively. While all this is happening, your tissues are rebuilding. Repair is not magic. It is cell division, protein synthesis, collagen remodeling, and time. Time is the one ingredient you cannot substitute. And this is where sleep slips back into the story, like a maintenance shift. When you sleep, immune signaling changes. Certain cytokines rise, others fall. Your body reallocates effort toward restoration and away from performance. Growth hormone pulses more, helping tissue repair and metabolism. Your brain clears metabolic waste more efficiently through fluid movement. It is not a spa night. It is scheduled downtime for a biological machine. You, the person, experience it as drifting away. You, the organism, experience it as maintenance. Speaking of maintenance, there is a smaller crew below all of this. Cells copying themselves, replacing worn-out parts, rebuilding you in pieces. You are not one continuous object. You are a process that keeps renewing itself as long as resources last. And your immune system is constantly replacing its workers. Many immune cells are short-lived by design. Neutrophils can last hours to days. They rush in, do damage, and die. Their corpses become pus, which is not poetic, but it is honest. Other immune cells live longer. Memory B cells and memory T cells can persist for years. They are the reason vaccines work. They remember a target, so next time the response is faster. Your body keeps a quiet library of old enemies. Some viruses exploit that library in strange ways. Influenza changes its code often, forcing updates. Human immunodeficiency virus hides inside cells, mutating quickly. Some pathogens wear disguises made from your own molecules. It is a constant arms race, fought with proteins and timing. But most nights, the war is not active. Most nights, your immune system is doing housekeeping, clearing dead cells, fixing tiny leaks in barriers, watching for abnormal cells that might become cancer. Yes, that is another job it has. Immune surveillance notices cells acting strangely, displaying odd proteins. Cytotoxic T cells can eliminate them before they grow. Not always and not perfectly, but often enough that you never notice the attempt. You live on top of a quiet set of prevented disasters. Congratulations, you are alive partly because of invisible near misses. Now, slide your attention smaller still, past organs, past tissues, down to a single cell preparing to divide. You are that cell now, pressed among neighbors, bathed in warm fluid. Your membrane holds shape, a lipid bilayer, basically fat molecules in a disciplined sheet. Inside you, proteins float in crowded cytoplasm, bumping like commuters. There is no empty space in here. It is dense, busy, and quietly loud in a chemical way. You are not thinking, but you are regulated. Signals arrive at your membrane, binding receptors like keys and locks. Some signals say grow, some say stop, some say die, because death is also a tool. When you do divide, you do it on schedule and with paperwork. The cell cycle is a set of phases, and each phase has checkpoints. G1, grow and sense conditions. S phase, copy DNA. G2, prepare machinery. M phase, mitosis, the actual splitting, it sounds orderly because it has to be. Copying DNA is copying a library, letter by letter. Your genome is billions of base pairs long. A, C, G, and T, the 4 letters of this biological language. And you copy them with enzymes that are both fast and careful. DNA polymerase is the main copier, moving along a template strand. It adds complementary nucleotides, snapping them into place. But it also proofreads. If it inserts the wrong nucleotide, the shape is slightly off. The enzyme notices, backs up, cuts out the mistake, and tries again. This is the part that always surprises you. Not that mistakes happen, but that so many are corrected. Life is not sloppy by default. Life is sloppy only where sloppiness is affordable. DNA copying is not affordable to get wrong often. Even with proofreading, errors slip through. Radiation can damage DNA. Chemicals can alter bases. Replication can stutter on repetitive sequences. So you have repair systems. Mismatch repair catches errors missed by proofreading. Base excision repair removes damaged bases one at a time. Nucleotide excision repair cuts out bulky damage, like ultraviolet-induced lesions. Double-strand breaks are the worst. They are like ripping the book in half. Cells can patch them with non-homologous end joining, quick but error-prone, or with homologous recombination, slower but more accurate, using a template. This is all happening without your awareness. Every day, you are a clean room too, in your own way. Your cell is constantly filtering, correcting, and disposing. Proteins that misfold are tagged with ubiquitin, a molecular label. Tagged proteins are fed into proteasomes, barrel-shaped shredders. Autophagy, literally self-eating, digests larger debris and worn organelles. Mitochondria, your energy producers, can be recycled when damaged. Mitophagy is the tidy removal of tired power plants, because a damaged mitochondrion leaks reactive oxygen species. Reactive oxygen species are useful in small amounts. They are also corrosive like chemical sparks, so you manage them with antioxidants and enzymes like superoxide dismutase. Again, not heroism. Maintenance. When you finally commit to division, you condense your chromosomes. DNA wraps around histones, forming nucleosomes. Then coils tighter. Chromosomes become visible as thick X-shaped structures. Each X is 2 sister chromatids, identical copies joined at a centromere. Microtubules assemble into a spindle, a framework of protein fibers. They attach to chromosomes at kinetochores, little grabbing sites. Then comes alignment, like lining books on a shelf. Metaphase is the moment everything is arranged at the cell's equator. It looks calm, but tension is everywhere. The spindle checkpoint makes sure each chromosome is properly attached, because if you pull unevenly, you misaggregate chromosomes. Aneuploidy is the result. Wrong chromosome numbers. It is common in cancer cells and often lethal in embryos, so the checkpoint waits until it is satisfied. Then separation happens, anaphase begins, and sister chromatids are pulled apart. They move toward opposite poles, carried by shortening microtubules. The cell elongates. Then a contractile ring pinches the middle. Actin and myosin tighten like a drawstring. Cytokinesis splits you into two cells, two daughters, each with a copy of the genome and half the clutter. They start their own cycles, their own maintenance, their own quiet work. Your body replaces itself like this constantly. Your intestinal lining renews quickly because it faces harsh conditions. Skin renews steadily, which you already know because of the shedding. Blood cells have lifespans too. Red blood cells live about 4 months, give or take. They carry oxygen with hemoglobin, then get removed by the spleen. The spleen is like a quality control station for blood. Old red cells get trapped and dismantled. Iron is recycled. The rest becomes waste, including bilirubin, which colors bruises as they fade. Bruise colors are recycling in progress. Even your bones remodel. Osteoclasts break bone down. Osteoblasts build it up. You are a construction site that never closes. The trick is balance. Build enough, remove enough. Keep the structure functional. With age, that balance shifts. Repair still happens, but it gets slower, less perfect, more expensive. Cells accumulate damage. Telomeres shorten with division. Telomeres are protective caps at chromosome ends. They prevent DNA ends from being mistaken for breaks. Each time you copy DNA, the very end is hard to replicate fully. So telomeres shorten gradually, like a candle burning down. Some cells use an enzyme called telomerase to extend them. Stem cells use it more. Cancer cells often reactivate it, which is part of how they keep dividing. Immortality, in biology, usually comes with a price you do not want. And then there is senescence. Cells with too much damage can enter a state of permanent arrest. They stop dividing, but they do not die immediately. They secrete inflammatory signals, altering their neighborhood. It is a way to prevent damaged cells from becoming cancer. It is also a way to slowly increase background inflammation with age. Aging is not one thing. It is many small accounting problems piling up. Protein homeostasis slips. Mitochondria become less efficient. DNA repair becomes less perfect. Stem cell pools change. Immune function shifts, sometimes called immunosenescence. Your immune system becomes less responsive to new threats. It can also become more inflammatory at baseline. A tired security system, slower to respond, quicker to complain. Speaking of tired systems, machines do this too. Your spacecraft, your air filters, your cleanroom fans. They age in their own language. Bearings wear, lubricants degrade, thermal cycles, fatigue solder joints, radiation embrittles materials, or creates trapped charge in electronics. In both bodies and machines, small flaws can grow. A microscopic crack propagates with repeated stress. Vibration is especially good at finding weaknesses. If you want to break something, shake it long enough. Launch is the shake, but space keeps whispering afterwards. Every reaction wheel spin, every pump vibration, every thermal expansion. A spacecraft lives in a constant gentle tremor of operation. Engineers plan for this with margins and testing. They do vibration tests on shakers, simulating launch loads. They do thermal vacuum testing, cycling temperature and low pressure chambers. They do electromagnetic compatibility testing, making sure systems do not interfere. It is all a rehearsal for indifference, because The universe will not run the test again for you, and underneath both biology and engineering sits the same direction of time: entropy, the steady tendency toward more probable arrangements. Not evil, not personal, just math expressing itself as inconvenience. In a clean room, entropy looks like dust settling. In a spacecraft, it looks like heat spreading, unless guided. In your body, it looks like damage accumulation, unless repaired. Life and technology are both little entropy pumps. They maintain order locally by spending energy. You export disorder to keep yourself organized. You eat, you burn fuel, you produce heat and waste. The clean room consumes electricity, runs fans, swaps filters, creates trash bags. Order is never free. It is rented hourly, and the rent gets higher when you want precision. A telescope mirror needs higher rent than a picnic table. A heart valve needs higher rent than a fingernail. So maintenance becomes a philosophy. Whether you asked for one or not, you do not win forever. You keep things good enough, long enough to do what you came to do. And that is strangely comforting if you let it be. Because it means the goal is not perfection. The goal is function. The goal is tonight. Now, drift back down into the practical grit of it. Imagine you are a tiny patch of metal on a spacecraft radiator. You sit facing deep space, trying to glow heat away as infrared light. Your surface coating matters. A little contamination changes your emissivity, the ease of radiating heat. A slightly darker patch absorbs more sunlight, warms more, radiates differently. Thermal control becomes patchy. Patchy becomes stress. Stress becomes a crack at a rivet hole years later. This is how small things travel forward in time. A fingerprint today becomes a thermal anomaly later. A fiber trapped in a connector becomes an intermittent signal in a cold eclipse. The universe loves delayed consequences. It is patient, unlike you. Speaking of patience, consider the people who build these machines. They work under bright lights, in quiet rooms, doing slow movements for hours. They log every step. Because memory is not a reliable instrument, they deal with audits, inspections, and the gentle tyranny of standards. They also deal with the simple physical discomfort of the suit. The suit is warm, the mask itches, the gloves reduce sensation. You feel clumsy even if you are skilled, and you cannot scratch your nose. That is the true test of discipline. You can handle rocket science, but your own face becomes the enemy. You learn to redirect the itch with patience, or you leave the room, degown, scratch, regown, and lose time. Time is money. Money is pressure. Pressure makes people cut corners. Corners are where particles hide. So good clean room culture is not just cleaning. It is permission to go slow. It is management agreeing that boredom is valuable. It is everyone agreeing that rushing is the most expensive mistake. That is rare in the rest of life. Most of your world rewards speed and visible progress. Clean rooms reward stillness and invisible prevention. They reward not making a mistake that no one will ever see. That is almost spiritual in a bleak industrial way, and it mirrors your immune system again. When it is working well, you do not notice. When it fails, Suddenly, it is the only thing you can think about. The best systems are quiet. Quiet is competence. Quiet as fans humming, filters catching, cells repairing, and nothing dramatic happening. But there is always drama available if you want it. Stop filtering air on a spacecraft, and you will learn quickly. Stop repairing DNA, and you will learn eventually. Stop wiping optics, and the photons will complain. Stop maintaining joints, and inflammation will file paperwork in triplicate. So you keep going, night after night, mission after mission. You replace filters, you run checklists, you sleep, if you are lucky, and undersleep. Your cells copy, your immune system adjusts, your brain resets. That is the loop. You may not love it, but it is what works. Now let your attention settle on one more small seam inside you. You are a stem cell in bone marrow, tucked into a niche near blood vessels. It is dim here, warm and crowded. Around you, stromal cells make the niche feel like padded scaffolding, supportive and quietly opinionated. You are not alone in here, even when you feel like a single cell with responsibilities. You are surrounded by signals, chemical whispers that decide what you will become. A little of one signal nudges you toward red blood cells. A different mix nudges you toward platelets or neutrophils or lymphocytes with long memories. This is hematopoiesis, blood making, which is a fancy word for non-stop replacement. It happens because blood is a working fluid, and working fluids pick up damage. Your job as this stem cell is to stay undecided until the body needs you. That undecided state is not laziness, it is strategy. If you specialize too early, you cannot pivot when an infection shows up. If you divide too fast, you burn out the stem cell pool. So you balance self-renewal and differentiation like a manager who hates overtime. You divide, slowly, producing one cell like you, and one cell ready to commit. The committed cell moves outward into louder territory. It enters a line of development, a conveyor belt of maturity. Some become erythrocytes, red blood cells, losing their nucleus on purpose. Yes, you heard that correctly. They throw away the command center. They do it to make more room for hemoglobin, the oxygen-carrying protein. A red blood cell is basically a flexible bag of molecular cargo. No nucleus, no mitochondria, no time for personal growth. Just delivery shifts through narrow capillaries until the spleen retires you. Other descendants become megakaryocytes, enormous cells that shed platelets like glitter. Platelets are not full cells. They are fragments with emergency training. They patrol for vessel damage, ready to stick and clot within seconds. You do not notice them until you cut yourself, and then you pretend you were always grateful. Some of your descendants become neutrophils, the fast responders. They are born, trained, and deployed with brutal efficiency. They live for days, sometimes less, and die in the mess they help create. This is what a disposable workforce looks like in biology. And then there are the lymphocytes, the ones who keep files. B cells, T cells, and natural killer cells, each with a different kind of suspicion. They take longer to mature, and many of them never get used because the system makes more candidates than it needs. Selection is harsh, and it happens before you ever face a real pathogen. In the thymus, T cells are tested for usefulness and restraint. If you cannot recognize the body's own signaling proteins, you are useless. If you recognize them too well, you are dangerous. Congratulations, you are either fired for incompetence or fired for enthusiasm. Only I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request. The ones who pass are allowed to live, and that survival comes with paperwork. They leave the thymus with receptors tuned for a narrow kind of recognition. They can notice a threat, but they should not panic over your own cells. Should not is doing a lot of work in that sentence, because the whole trick is recognizing patterns without loving the pattern of you. Some T cells become helpers, coordinating responses like night shift managers. Some become killers, carrying enzymes that punch holes in infected cells. And some become regulators, the ones who whisper, "Enough, stand down, go home." Regulators are the reason your immune system does not eat you for sport. They are also why immune balance is a constant negotiation. You are not built for peace. You are built for controlled conflict. Even in training, your immune system learns using violence as a teaching tool. Cells that fail selection die quietly, dismantled and recycled. Apoptosis is the term, programmed cell death, which means a clean demolition. It is a cell taking itself apart, packaging the pieces, and avoiding a mess. Necrosis is the messy kind. When a cell bursts and spills contents, necrosis triggers inflammation, because spilled insides look like an emergency. So, apoptosis is preferred, a tidy exit, a polite disappearance. Your body has a surprising amount of polite disappearance built in. Now imagine the opposite, the kind of cell that does not accept limits. A cell that ignores stop signals, keeps dividing, and refuses to die. That is not ambition. That is cancer with a calendar. Cancer is not one disease. It is a family of cheats. Different tissues, different mutations, same basic theme, growth without permission. The immune system can catch some of those early sometimes, but cancers evolve because they are made of variation and selection. They hide their abnormal proteins, or silence them, or downplay them. Some recruit immune suppression, bribing the local environment into calm. Tumors can create a neighborhood that tells T cells to get tired. T cell exhaustion is a real phenomenon, a worn-down attack force. It is one reason immunotherapy can work, by lifting the brakes. Checkpoint inhibitors block signals like PD-1, letting T cells fight again. The results can be dramatic and also risky, because brakes exist for reasons. Remove too many, and the immune system can attack healthy tissue. Congratulations, you fixed one problem by creating a more intimate one. Now your body becomes a clean room with the security team on edge. Autoimmunity is the tragic version of enthusiasm. Type 1, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis. Different targets, similar story. Self becomes enemy on paper. Sometimes it is genetics, sometimes infections, sometimes bad luck with training. The immune system is probabilistic, not moral. It gets most things right, most days. And you live in the margin. Speaking of margins, your immune system also has to tolerate a lot. Your gut is full of microbes, and it cannot treat them as invaders. Trillions of bacteria live there, eating what you cannot digest alone. They produce vitamins, short-chain fatty acids, and a steady stream of molecules. Your immune system learns a kind of diplomacy at the intestinal wall. It uses immunoglobulin A antibodies, a gentle coating in mucus. It limits contact, it contains, it does not massacre the entire city. When that barrier fails, inflammation rises and the system gets noisy. Inflammatory bowel disease is one example of a border problem. Too much immune activity in the gut, too much collateral damage. Even food can become suspicious. If the system is primed wrongly, that is part of allergy. An immune response misfiled is necessary. Peanut protein is not a parasite, but your immune system can disagree. Mast cells release histamine, blood vessels leak, airways tighten. The reaction is fast because it is built for fast threats, and yet the threat is a snack. The body is a bureaucracy that occasionally panics over the wrong form. Now, bring this back to where you started tonight, in the clean room. In both worlds, the danger is often small, drifting, and easy to underestimate. A pollen grain is a particle with intent, designed to travel and persist. A dust mote is a small event waiting for a surface to land on. A virus is smaller still, a packet of instructions with no body of its own. It is just protein shell and nucleic acid, and a desire to replicate. Viruses are not alive in the full sense. They are alive the way fire is. They need fuel, they need a host, they turn your machinery into copies. You are the host now, not the observer. You are a single epithelial cell in your airway, lined with mucus. Cilia wave above you, tiny hair-like motors pushing mucus upward. This escalator clears debris, lifting it toward the throat to swallow. It is maintenance you never notice until it fails. A virus arrives in a droplet, drifting through air like a rumor. It lands on the mucus, and some of it gets trapped and removed. But one particle gets close enough to bind a receptor on your membrane. Binding is chemistry, pretending to be a key and lock. The virus uses that attachment to enter via fusion or endocytosis. Endocytosis is you swallowing it because the membrane can fold inward. Congratulations, you just helped your own infection with excellent customer service. Inside, the virus releases its genome, and your ribosomes start reading it. Ribosomes do not know loyalty. They translate whatever instructions fit. The cell becomes a factory that has been quietly retooled. Viral proteins assemble. New viral genomes copy. Particles form and exit. Some viruses bud from the membrane, stealing the piece of you as envelope. Some burst out, lysing the cell and spilling into the airway. Now the immune system notices because stressed cells send distress signals. Interferons are among those signals, warning neighbors to prepare defenses. Interferons change gene expression, making antiviral proteins more active. They also make you feel sick because sickness is a coordinated response. Your temperature rises, your appetite drops, your body tells you to slow down. The virus does not care about your discomfort, but your body does. It wants to reduce spread, conserve resources, and focus on clearing. The first responders arrive, the innate immune cells. Macrophages in the lung eat debris, release cytokines, and call for help. Neutrophils arrive and spill enzymes and oxidants into the battlefield. The tissue swells, the mucus thickens, airflow becomes less smooth. Congestion is not just annoyance, it is physical defense. Mucus can trap pathogens, but it also makes breathing feel like work. Then, adaptive immunity ramps up. slower but more targeted. T cells recognize infected cells presenting viral fragments on MHC molecules. They kill those cells to stop replication, which is grim but efficient. B cells produce antibodies, neutralizing viral particles in fluids. Some antibodies persist, memory remains. Future responses speed up. This is the immune system learning, the way a clean room learns patterns. Watch the movement, notice the contamination, adjust the flow. Only in your body, the flow is blood and lymph and chemical signals. Lymph is the drainage network, a second set of pipes beside the blood. It returns fluid to circulation and carries immune cells to lymph nodes. Lymph nodes are like inspection stations, filtering and presenting evidence. Dendritic cells bring samples showing antigen to T cells. This is the meeting where a full response becomes authorized. It is slow on purpose, because wrong authorization is expensive. Wrong authorization is allergy or autoimmunity or chronic inflammation. So the system waits until the evidence and context line up. And while it waits, you exist in a state of low-level maintenance, quiet surveillance, debris removal, constant barrier repair. If you are healthy, you barely feel any of this. That is the real luxury, being unaware of your internal janitors. Now, pivot again, because your body is not the only closed system tonight. Machines have their own versions of immune systems, in their own dull way. A spacecraft does not have white blood cells, but it has fault detection. It has sensors, limits, alarms, and automatic safe modes. It watches temperature, voltage, current, pressure, and rotation. If something goes outside expected ranges, it reacts. Maybe it switches to backup hardware, redundant pathways. Maybe it turns off a payload to save power. Maybe it points solar panels at the sun to recharge. Safe mode is a spacecraft playing dead until ground control speaks. That is a kind of immune response, if you squint gently. It does not heal itself fully, but it can prevent cascade failures. Cascade failures are what happen when one problem triggers others. Heat rises, components drift out of range, sensors fail, control fails. On Earth, you could open a panel, smell the burnt part, and replace it. In orbit, you do not get that luxury. So, the machine is built to tolerate failures and keep breathing. Breathing for a spacecraft is thermal management and power stability. As long as those survive, recovery is possible. This is why clean rooms matter, because early contamination can cause late faults. A dust mote becomes a thermal hotspot. A hotspot becomes stress. Stress becomes crack. The failure shows up years later, far from the original cause. It is the same delayed consequence you see in biology. A small mutation escapes repair. The cell divides. The clone expands quietly. Years later, a tumor appears, and everyone acts surprised. But the surprise is just ignorance of slow processes. Slow processes are the real horror of both life and machines. They do not jump out, they creep. Now the story drifts toward where, because where is entropy with a schedule. You are inside a bearing now, a small, rotating joint in a mechanism. Maybe it is in a reaction wheel used to control spacecraft attitude. Reaction wheels spin to change angular momentum. A clever trick. Spin the wheel one way, the spacecraft rotates the other way. No propellant needed, just electricity and a willingness to manage vibrations. Reaction wheels are beautifully useful and also sensitive to wear. Bearings rely on smooth surfaces and lubrication, and vacuum complicates that. Lubricants can outgas, migrate, or degrade under radiation. So, space-rated lubricants are chosen carefully, often synthetic oils or greases. Sometimes solid lubricants are used, like molybdenum disulfide coatings. Solid lubricants feel like cheating, but in vacuum, cheating is survival. Still, wear occurs, microscopic asperities scraping and welding and tearing. In metal, surface features touch at tiny points. High-pressure contacts. Friction produces heat and can cause adhesive wear. Particles form, debris in the grease, which becomes an abrasive paste. Now, the bearing wears faster and vibration increases. Vibration affects pointing stability, and pointing affects science data. One worn bearing can blur a telescope image or destabilize an antenna. So engineers monitor wheel currents, temperatures, and vibration signatures. They listen to the machine the way a doctor listens to lungs. There is also something called stiction, static friction that resists initial motion. In cold conditions, lubricants thicken and stiction rises. A wheel might struggle to start, then jerk, then overshoot. Control algorithms compensate, but every compensation has limits. So you see it again, the universe charging rent. To have precise pointing, you pay with careful design and constant monitoring. To have clean optics, you pay with clean rooms and slow hands. To have a stable body, you pay with sleep and repair and immune discipline. Everything is a maintenance contract, signed at birth or at launch. And that brings you to aging, the long, calm slide. Aging in machines looks like material fatigue, corrosion, radiation damage. Aging in bodies looks like cellular senescence, protein aggregation, immune shift. In both, the story is less about one catastrophe and more about accumulation. Tiny cracks, tiny errors, tiny misfolds, tiny losses of efficiency. It is not tragic on the minute scale. It is just arithmetic. You can picture it as a ledger, with repairs on one side, damage on the other side, and energy paying the difference. As long as repairs keep up, the system feels stable. When repairs fall behind, entropy starts collecting interest. In a spacecraft, one common slow killer is thermal cycling fatigue. Soldered joints can crack after repeated expansion and contraction. Solder is metal, but it is softer, and it creeps over time. A joint that looks fine can develop micro cracks, changing resistance. Resistance makes heat, heat makes more stress, and the loop tightens. In electronics, heat is not only a byproduct, it is a predictor. Warmer components often age faster because chemical reactions speed up. That includes battery degradation, capacitor drying, insulation breakdown. So thermal management is also lifespan management. That is why radiators matter and why contamination on radiators matters. A slightly dirty radiator changes temperature. Temperature changes lifetime. The clean room wipe echoes forward into years of operation. You can almost hear the timeline, a slow ticking through orbits. Now, let your perspective shift to something smaller and quieter. You are a red blood cell now, drifting through a capillary. The capillary is narrow, and you fold like a soft coin. Your membrane is flexible, built from lipids and proteins. Spectrin and ankyrin are structural proteins, giving you resilience. You squeeze through gaps smaller than your resting shape. This is normal, and it is also stress, repeated thousands of times. Over months, that stress damages you, oxidizes proteins, stiffens the membrane. Without a nucleus, you cannot repair by making new proteins easily. You rely on enzymes you already carry, like catalase and glutathione pathways. You handle reactive oxygen species from oxygen transport itself, because carrying oxygen is like carrying a polite oxidizer through town. Eventually, you become less flexible, and the spleen notices. In the spleen, narrow slits test your deformability. Fail the test, and macrophages eat you, recycling iron and parts. It is quality control again, just like clean room inspection. The body is full of gates that decide who passes. Now, as you float, consider how much oxygen you move. Hemoglobin binds oxygen in lungs, releases in tissues. It also carries carbon dioxide partly and helps buffer blood pH. Blood pH is tightly controlled because enzymes are picky. Too acidic, proteins change shape and lose function. Too basic, same problem, different direction. So the body uses buffers, respiration, and kidneys to keep balance. Respiration removes carbon dioxide, which is an acid source in water. Kidneys excrete acids and reabsorb bicarbonate, slower but powerful. This is another closed system regulation like humidity control in a spacecraft. Too much carbon dioxide in the cabin makes you sleepy and foggy. Too much carbon dioxide in blood makes you acidic and distressed. In both cases, ventilation and filtering are the quiet fix, and sleep, again, fits in the background as a maintenance window. During sleep, breathing patterns change, and carbon dioxide rises slightly. In most people, the system tolerates it, adjusting gently. But in sleep apnea, the airway collapses. Breathing stops briefly. Carbon dioxide rises, oxygen drops. The brain wakes you enough to reopen airway. It is fragmented sleep, the body forced to do emergency resets. You might not remember waking, but your body remembers the stress. Blood pressure rises, inflammation can increase, fatigue accumulates. It is a reminder that even sleep can be compromised by physics. Gravity on the airway, muscle tone relaxing, tissue, geometry. The universe loves geometry, and it loves using it against you. Now, we move to another slow process, one that sounds abstract but is physical. Entropy, not as a concept, but as a texture in daily life. In the clean room, entropy is the constant arrival of dust. In your body, entropy is the constant drift toward disorder. Proteins misfold occasionally, membranes get damaged, DNA gets nicked. The system fights back with chaperones, antioxidants, repair enzymes. Heat shock proteins help refold stressed proteins, like patient attendance. If refolding fails, proteins are tagged for degradation. Tagging uses ubiquitin, small proteins attached as flags. Proteasomes then chew the flagged proteins into peptides. Those peptides are recycled into amino acids, used again. Recycling is not a moral virtue, it is a survival tactic. A spacecraft recycles heat by moving it, not destroying it. A body recycles materials by breaking and rebuilding, not wasting. Even so, waste accumulates in corners. In neurons, some proteins can aggregate, forming plaques or tangles. Alzheimer's disease involves amyloid beta and tau pathology, among other changes. The biology is complex and still studied, but the theme is accumulation. Aging brains are not simply losing cells, they are changing maintenance balance. Sleep matters here too, because brain fluid flow increases in deep sleep. The glymphatic system clears metabolic waste more efficiently then. It is like opening the drains during low traffic hours. If sleep is fragmented for years, clearance may be less effective. Again, not a single cause, but a contribution to the slow ledger. Now, you return to machines for a moment, because the analogy holds. Spacecraft electronics also suffer from accumulation in a different form. Radiation can create trapped charge in insulating layers of microchips. Total ionizing dose builds up, changing transistor thresholds. Single event effects cause bit flips, latch-ups, or transient glitches. So designers use radiation-hardened components, shielding, and error correction. Error correction codes detect and correct bit flips in memory. Watchdog timers reset processors if they hang. It is a mechanical immune system made of logic. It does not heal, but it can prevent death by confusion. Confusion is deadly in space because there is no one nearby to interpret. Now, back to the cleanroom technician, because you have not escaped them. You are that technician again, hours into a shift. Your shoulders ache slightly under the gown. Your hands feel dry inside gloves, skin deprived of air. The room hums, constant airflow like distant surf. You have been moving slowly so long, it feels like a personality change. This is the part nobody advertises, the bodily boredom of precision. Your mind wanders, and that is when mistakes try to happen. Not dramatic mistakes, just a hand drifting too close, a head leaning over an open assembly, a glove brushing a surface by accident, leaving a smear of oil. So procedures exist, and you follow them. Because they are scaffolding, they keep your attention from slipping into improvisation. There is a quiet dignity in that, if you can tolerate it. Being the kind of person who